Every morning, she woke up to the sound of her alarm, a shrill reminder that another day had begun. The same routine, day after day. She wasn't a morning person. In fact, she often grumbled to herself as she pulled herself out of bed, rubbing her tired eyes. But there was something about the quiet before the world fully woke up, something about the stillness that made the early hours a little special. And so, she carried on. You see, Emma wasn't a stranger to the world of helping. For as long as she could remember, she had been a kind-hearted soul, the type who always found ways to help others, even when it was a bit inconvenient. Her job, a simple one, really, was to serve coffee at the local cafe. Nothing glamorous, just a friendly smile and a warm cup in the morning. She didn't expect much in return, other than the simple satisfaction of making someone's day just a little brighter. But the thing is, every single day, she served coffee to countless faces. Faces that she often never really looked at, faces that came and went. But one person, just one, would change everything for her. It wasn't until weeks later, when the crisp morning air began to turn to a cool, comforting chill that she noticed him. He was there every day, as usual, sitting in his usual corner, his back turned to the cafe's large window, a book in front of him. She had seen him countless times before. He was just another regular, just like the others. But something was different that morning. She had never really paid attention to him. He wasn't a loud, vibrant person. No, he was quiet. He'd sit there with his book, always sipping his coffee slowly, quietly, eyes focused on the pages before him. She always thought he was just a man lost in a book, nothing special. But that morning, he seemed different. There was a sadness in his eyes, something she had never noticed before. It was faint, but it was there. Maybe it was just a fleeting thought. Maybe it was her imagination. But something about him struck her differently today. She couldn't shake it. As the hours passed, she found herself looking over at him more often. He hadn't noticed her watching, he was lost in his book. But every time she looked, there was that same sadness lingering in his eyes. It wasn't until the last order of the day that she finally spoke to him. It was just a casual question, just a simple, "Would you like more coffee?" He looked up, startled, almost as if he didn't expect anyone to speak to him. There was a long pause. And then, he smiled, a small, polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes," he said softly, his voice quieter than usual. She went to refill his cup, a simple task, really. But somehow, as she stood there, with her hands wrapped around the coffee pot, it felt different. The weight of that moment felt heavier than it should have been. She handed him the cup, but there was something about him, about his gaze, that she couldn't. And then, it happened. As if something inside of him finally cracked, he spoke, not much, just a few words. "I've been coming here for a while now," he said, pausing. "But I don't think anyone has ever really noticed me." She froze, surprised by his words. He wasn't asking for attention, or sympathy. It wasn't that kind of statement. It was just a quiet truth, one that had been sitting there, in his heart, for who knows how long. "I'm sorry," she replied gently. "I didn't mean to ignore you." He gave a small nod. "It's fine. I didn't really expect anything." And in that moment, it was as though everything around them faded. The sounds of the cafe, the chatter, the clinking of cups, it all disappeared. It was just them, standing there, sharing something unspoken. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that this man was not like the others she had served over the years. He wasn't just another customer. He was someone who, for reasons unknown to her, had slipped through the cracks of life, unnoticed, unappreciated. He was someone who carried a burden so heavy, it seemed as though the weight of the world was on his shoulders. She had no idea who she was helping every morning. She had no idea who this man was, or what he was going through. But on that particular day, everything changed. Days turned into weeks, and Emma's mornings continued in their usual rhythm. She came in early, brewed the coffee, wiped down the counters, and served the regulars. Nothing had really changed, or so she thought. But there was something different about her routine now. She couldn't quite explain it, but after that brief encounter, she found herself looking at the man in the corner with new eyes. She noticed the way his fingers gently turned the pages of his book, how his eyes lingered a little too long on each word. She noticed the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking, how he'd occasionally glance at the door, as if waiting for something or someone. She found herself wondering, who was he? What was his story? And just as before, he came in every morning, sat in the same corner, and ordered the same coffee. He didn't change. But she did. She began to notice the small things, the subtle details. One morning, she saw him leave, and without thinking, she walked to the door after him. She wasn't sure why. She just felt compelled. As she reached the door, she saw him walk down the street, a little slower than usual, his shoulders even more hunched. It was then she noticed the worn-out shoes on his feet, shoes that had clearly seen better days. And that's when it hit her, he wasn't just another lonely person in the cafe. There was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. But what could she do? She was just the barista. Just the girl who served coffee. She didn't have the answers, and she certainly didn't have the power to change anything. Or so she thought. One day, after weeks of simply observing, she made a choice. It wasn't much, but it was something. As she poured his coffee, she handed it to him with a small smile, a little warmer than usual. He looked up at her, almost surprised, and then, he did something that caught her completely off guard. He smiled back. A real smile. It wasn't a smile of politeness or obligation. No, it was a smile that carried something more. A sense of gratitude. And in that moment, something inside Emma stirred. The next day, instead of just handing him his usual coffee, she took a chance. She said something she hadn't said to anyone in a long time. "You don't have to sit here alone," she said, her voice tentative but sincere. "I mean, I know it's not much, but, you don't have to be alone." The words hung in the air between them. Emma's heart raced, unsure if she had overstepped, unsure of what had just come over her. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes softening. "I've gotten used to being alone," he replied quietly. "It's just easier that way." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words. But she didn't give up. Over the next few days, their brief exchanges became more frequent. She learned that his name was Daniel. He worked at a small accounting firm nearby. He wasn't a man of many words, but he had a quiet kindness that Emma couldn't ignore. And as she listened to him over time, little by little, she began to understand. Daniel had a life full of loss, not just the loss of loved ones, but the loss of hope. He had been burned by people before, and so, he had built walls around himself, brick by brick. He hadn't asked for help. He hadn't expected anyone to notice him. But somehow, Emma had. And it wasn't just about the coffee. It was about the way she made him feel. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt like he mattered, like he wasn't just another face in the crowd. One morning, he sat down at his usual spot, but today, something was different. He wasn't reading his book. His hands were folded in front of him, his expression deep in thought. As Emma came to serve him, he looked up at her and, with a bit of hesitation in his voice, said something that would forever change her life. "Emma, I think I might need some help." The words felt like a small crack in the wall he had spent so long building. He had never asked anyone for help before. He had always dealt with things on his own, quietly suffering in silence. But in that moment, something shifted. He trusted her enough to ask for help. Emma paused. She didn't know exactly what to say, but she knew one thing, she couldn't ignore him anymore. "You don't have to do this alone, Daniel," she said, her voice soft but steady. "We all need a little help sometimes." His eyes softened at her words, the vulnerability in his gaze unmistakable. And so, in that moment, everything changed. Emma didn't know what was coming next, she didn't know how. But she knew one thing for sure. Her life, and Daniel's, would never be the same. After that day, things were different. The cafe felt different. The air felt different. Emma felt different. She didn't know exactly how to explain it, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't had before. Helping Daniel had unlocked something inside her, something that she hadn't known was missing. It wasn't just about the coffee anymore. It was about making a real connection, about showing someone that they mattered, even when they felt like they didn't. She'd learned that sometimes, just being seen was all someone needed. Daniel's visits became more than just routine. He'd still sit at the same corner, his book in front of him, but now there was something more between them. Conversations began to bloom like flowers in spring, small at first, just a few words here and there, but over time, they grew. And every conversation felt like a small breakthrough. He talked more now, about his life, his struggles, and even his fears. He wasn't the same quiet, reserved man she had first met. It was as if, by simply being there for him, Emma had peeled away the layers that had kept him hidden for so long. And as he shared more, she began to understand him in a way she hadn't before. One morning, he told her about his childhood. "I used to have so many dreams, Emma," he said, his voice far away. "I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to paint. But, life got in the way. People told me I needed to be practical, to get a real job. So I gave up on it. I gave up on everything, really." Emma listened quietly, her heart aching for him. She had no idea that beneath the layers of this quiet man sat a dreamer, someone who had once had hopes and ambitions but had buried them long ago. "I think we all give up on something," Emma said softly. "It doesn't mean it's gone forever. Maybe it's just waiting for the right moment to come back." He looked at her, his eyes searching her face as though he was trying to understand what she meant. "You really think that?" he asked. "I do," she said, a gentle smile on her lips. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us that it's still possible. We don't always have to be stuck." Daniel sat in silence for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not too late." It was as though those words, those few, simple words, had planted a seed in his heart. A seed of hope. Days passed, and little by little, Daniel began to open up even more. He told Emma about the struggles he'd faced in his life, the betrayals, the disappointments, and the pain of seeing his dreams slip away. But with each story, Emma noticed something else. The weight on his shoulders seemed to get a little lighter. There was something so beautiful about the way he trusted her. And she began to feel that same trust in return. One day, Emma handed him his coffee as usual, but this time, there was something different in her expression. But she knew one thing for sure. Her life, and Daniel's, would never be the same. After that day, things were different. The cafe felt different. The air felt different. Emma felt different. She didn't know exactly how to explain it, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't had before. Helping Daniel had unlocked something inside her, something that she hadn't known was missing. It wasn't just about the coffee anymore. It was about making a real connection, about showing someone that they mattered, even when they felt like they didn't. She'd learned that sometimes, just being seen was all someone needed. Daniel's visits became more than just routine. He'd still sit at the same corner, his book in front of him, but now there was something more between them. Conversations began to bloom like flowers in spring, small at first, just a few words here and there, but over time, they grew. And every conversation felt like a small breakthrough. He talked more now, about his life, his struggles, and even his fears. He wasn't the same quiet, reserved man she had first met. It was as if, By simply being there for him, Emma had peeled away the layers that had kept him hidden for so long. And as he shared more, she began to understand him in a way she hadn't before. One morning, he told her about his childhood. "I used to have so many dreams, Emma," he said, his voice far away. "I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to paint. But life got in the way. People told me I needed to be practical, to get a real job. So I gave up on it. I gave up on everything, really." Emma listened quietly, her heart aching for him. She had no idea that beneath the layers of this quiet man sat a dreamer, someone who had once had hopes and ambitions but had buried them long ago. "I think we all give up on something," Emma said softly. "It doesn't mean it's gone forever. Maybe it's just waiting for the right moment to come back." He looked at her, his eyes searching her face as though he was trying to understand what she meant. "You really think that?" he asked. "I do," she said, a gentle smile on her lips. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us that it's still possible. We don't always have to be stuck." Daniel sat in silence for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not too late." It was as though those words, those few, simple words, had planted a seed in his heart. A seed of hope. Days passed, and little by little, Daniel began to open up even more. He told Emma about the struggles he'd faced in his life, the betrayals, the disappointments, and the pain of seeing his dreams slip away. But with each story, Emma noticed something else. The weight on his shoulders seemed to get a little lighter. There was something so beautiful about the way he trusted her. And she began to feel that same trust in return. One day, Emma handed him his coffee as usual, but this time, there was something different in her expression. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft but sure. "Maybe you should paint again. I know it's been a long time, but what if you could start with just a little?" Daniel stared at her, a mix of surprise and disbelief in his eyes. "Paint?" he echoed, almost as if the idea was foreign to him. "Yes," Emma said, nodding slowly. "I think it could be good for you. It's not too late. You still have it in you. I can see it." For a long time, Daniel didn't say anything. He just looked at her, as if processing the idea. But then, for the first time, he smiled. It wasn't a smile of politeness or obligation. It was a smile of possibility, a smile of someone who had dared to dream again, even if just for a moment. "You know," he said quietly, "I think I just might." And from that day on, everything changed. Daniel didn't start painting right away, but he began to talk about it more. He bought a sketchbook and some paints. He even started looking for a place to paint, a quiet space where he could be alone with his thoughts and his brushes. It was a slow journey, but it was a journey all the same. And Emma, in her own small way, had been the one to help him take that first step. She had no idea what her small act of kindness had triggered. She had no idea how much it would impact Daniel's life. But now, she could see the change. She could see the spark of life returning to him, bit by bit. And that was the most beautiful thing of all. As the weeks passed, Emma found herself feeling more and more fulfilled. She had always been someone who helped others, but now, it felt different. Now, it wasn't just about making someone's day a little brighter. Now, it was about changing lives, about helping people rediscover pieces of themselves they thought were lost forever. And it wasn't just Daniel. She began to see that everyone who came into the cafe, everyone who passed through her life, was fighting their own battles. Everyone was carrying their own burdens. And maybe, just maybe, she could help them, too. One morning, as she stood behind the counter, her mind wandered back to Daniel. She wondered what he was painting now, what dreams he was chasing. But she didn't have to wonder for long. That afternoon, Daniel came into the cafe, his eyes shining with excitement. He had something in his hands, a small canvas, wrapped in brown paper. "I painted something," he said, his voice full of pride. "It's not much, but it's a start." Emma took the canvas from him, unwrapping it carefully. And there it was. A beautiful painting. Not perfect, but raw and full of life. It was a landscape, with mountains in the distance and a sun rising behind them. It was a symbol of hope, of new beginnings. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." And as she looked at him, she realized something that took her by surprise. She hadn't just helped Daniel rediscover his dreams. She had rediscovered something. In herself, too. As the days went by, Emma found herself waking up earlier and earlier. She had always been a creature of habit, but now there was something else driving her, something she hadn't felt before. There was a joy in her heart, a sense of purpose that she had never known in the routine of her daily life. She was no longer just a barista. She was a part of something bigger. She was a part of Daniel's journey, and, in some strange way, she was part of her own journey too. The cafe, which had once been just a place to work, had become a symbol of connection, of the unexpected ways in which lives intertwine. And it wasn't just Daniel. Every person who came into the cafe now felt more real to her. More human. Each one of them had a story, a struggle, a dream they were chasing, just like her, just like Daniel. And, for some reason, she felt more connected to them all. She was still just serving coffee, but now, she saw people for who they were, not just the faces they wore when they walked through the door. And then, something unexpected happened. One day, Emma came into the cafe to find the entire place buzzing with excitement. There were whispers in the air, a ripple of anticipation. The baristas were talking excitedly to each other, customers were whispering to their friends. Emma didn't know what was going on. Until she saw Daniel. He was standing near the window, a huge smile on his face, holding up a flyer. "I'm having an art show," he said, almost as if he couldn't believe it himself. "I'm showing my paintings. My first show." Her heart swelled with pride. She hadn't just helped him pick up a paintbrush again. She had helped him reclaim his place in the world. "How amazing," Emma said, her voice full of awe. "I'm so proud of you." Daniel beamed. "I never thought I'd get here. But somehow, here I am." And the opening night of his art show came, sooner than Emma expected. The night was cool, the air crisp with a touch of fall. Emma arrived at the small gallery where Daniel was displaying his work. The walls were lined with paintings, landscapes, cityscapes, abstract pieces that captured emotion and beauty. Some were simple, others were complex, each one telling its own story. And there, standing in the middle of it all, was Daniel. He was no longer the quiet man who hid behind his book in the cafe. No, tonight he was an artist, standing in front of his work, talking to visitors, smiling and laughing. He was alive in a way he hadn't been before. He was free. Emma stood back for a moment, watching him. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was why she had done it. This was why she had stepped out of her comfort zone, why she had seen him in the way no one else had. Because sometimes, all someone needs is a little encouragement. A little belief. A little nudge to help them realize their worth. And Daniel wasn't the only one changed that night. As she watched him, Emma realized something important. It wasn't just about helping others. It was about seeing the potential in them, and helping them see it too. She had seen something in Daniel that he hadn't seen in himself. And because of that, he had taken that first step into the life he had always dreamed of. He had taken the leap, and so had she. Later in the evening, as the show began to wind down, Daniel found Emma. He looked at her with the same expression she had seen countless times before, gratitude. But there was something more now. There was a sense of deep, genuine appreciation. "Thank you, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I could have done this without you." Without your belief in me. Emma smiled, her eyes filling with tears. She didn't know what to say, so she just hugged him. A simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. You've always had it in you, Daniel, she whispered. I just gave you a little push. But the truth was, it wasn't just a push. It was something deeper. It was love. It was kindness. It was the way she saw him, the way she believed in him even when he couldn't see it himself. As the night came to a close, Daniel walked her to the door. He stopped and looked at her, his eyes full of warmth. Where do we go from here? He asked, his voice full of hope. Emma smiled, her heart light. Wherever you want to go, she said. The world's wide open for you now. And she meant it. Because in that moment, Emma realized something powerful: when you help someone find their way, you end up finding your own. The lesson was simple, but profound. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can spark the greatest changes. For Emma, it had been as simple as noticing someone who seemed invisible, and then being there when they needed it most. And for Daniel, that simple act had been the key to unlocking the future he had always dreamed of. Sometimes, the most important thing we can do is just show up for someone else. Because you never know when your kindness will change someone's life forever. Months passed, and Emma's life began to unfold in ways she hadn't imagined. She had always thought she was content, satisfied with her simple life, her routine. But in helping Daniel, she had rediscovered her own dreams, her own purpose. Daniel's art show had been just the beginning. He had gone on to hold more shows, his work gaining recognition in the local community. The small art gallery had turned into something bigger, with more and more people discovering his talent. He had even begun to teach art classes, helping others find their creativity in the same way Emma had helped him find his. And as for Emma, she had discovered a passion for mentoring. She began to take on small projects of her own, offering support to people in her community who, like Daniel, felt lost or overlooked. She started a program to help local artists find their voice, giving them the encouragement they needed to push through their doubts. Emma had become a guide, just as she had been for Daniel, only now she was helping more people, one at a time. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have predicted, was that Daniel wasn't the only one who had been transformed. Emma's small acts of kindness had sparked a change in herself. She had realized that her life could be more than just serving coffee and following the same routine every day. She didn't have to stay small. She could make an impact. She could leave a mark on the world. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about connection. It was about seeing people for who they truly were, about understanding their struggles, and about helping them overcome them, one step at a time. One afternoon, as Emma was closing the cafe for the day, Daniel stopped by, just as he had so many times before. This time, he wasn't coming in for his usual coffee. He had come to offer something in return, something that took Emma completely by surprise. I've been thinking a lot lately, he began, his voice soft but confident. And I want to give you something. You've done so much for me. You helped me rediscover myself. I want to do something for you. Emma was taken aback. Daniel, you don't have to. But he interrupted, shaking his head with a smile. No, I want to. You've given me so much. You've shown me what's possible when you believe in someone. Now, I want to show you that you're just as important as anyone else. You've got dreams, too. Don't forget that. With that, he handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, not just any check, but a generous one, one that would allow Emma to pursue her own dream, a dream she had tucked away for years. It was a gesture of gratitude, yes. But it was also a reminder that kindness always comes back around. The universe had a way of giving back what it had received. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she looked at Daniel. She couldn't find the words, but she didn't need to. She just hugged him tightly, feeling his warmth, feeling the depth of their connection. "You don't know what this means to me," she whispered. "I think I do," Daniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I do." That evening, as Emma sat in her small apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened, she realized that life was full of unexpected moments that could change everything. You never knew who you were helping, who you were touching, or how deep your impact might go. And sometimes, just a small act of kindness could be the spark that ignites a fire in someone's heart, and in your own. The lesson was clear, simple, and beautiful. You never know the power of your actions until you see how they ripple out, touching lives in ways you could never have imagined. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness lead to the greatest transformations. As Emma looked at the check in her hands, she knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The road ahead was still unknown, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her purpose, and in helping others, she had found herself. And she knew, without a doubt, that the journey she had begun, with just one simple act of kindness, would continue to unfold in ways she could never have imagined. The end. Please don't forget to tell us in the comments section the country you are watching from. Also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.